Hey guys, how's it going? Jordan Locke here. Disgraced Republican Congressman George Santos continues to embarrass and humiliate himself and really just show how much of a circus the Republican Party is in this country. So just last week, George Santos had an interview, and in this interview, he told a reporter that he opposes gay marriage. Now, keep in mind that George Santos himself is gay, and he is married. He has a partner. They've been married for several years now. So here's a guy who is married, is gay married, and is telling reporters that he opposes gay marriage because of the party that he's in, because he's in the Republican Party. So I wanted to bring this up because I think that this George Santos story kind of illustrates the sheer hypocrisy and self-hatred that so many Republicans have for themselves, right? People who are politicians in the Republican Party and supporters of the Republican Party. Why would a guy who is gay be a part of the Republican Party when Republicans hate gays? They always oppose LGBTQ legislation. They oppose any type of legislation that helps minorities. They mostly oppose legislation that helps women. So why would someone who falls into any one of these categories be a part of the Republican Party? It makes no sense. And I think that the answer is a lot of these people have a ton of self-hatred. And it manifests itself by them joining this party that hates them, right? The Republican Party is the party of racist white men, right? And that's not to say that all white men are racist, because they're certainly not. There are awesome white men, and most of those awesome white men happen to be part of the Democratic Party. It's funny how that works, right? But the Republican Party is the party of racist white men, racist white guys who think that they are better than everyone else, right? Who think that they are superior to everybody else. And that includes gay people, minorities, women, right? They are the most chauvinistic party. They are the most bigoted party. They are the most homophobic party. So why on earth would a guy who's gay join the Republican Party? When a story like this comes out, I think that this speaks volumes as to the mentality of these kinds of guys. And it's not just like George Santos, it's other people like Vivek Ramaswamy or Tim Scott, right? These guys are candidates for the Republican Party, or at least were candidates for the Republican Party. Tim Scott was a candidate. Vivek still is, although he's hanging on by a thread, and he probably won't be for any longer. But these guys have to know that they are not going to get elected running in the Republican Party, right? That's the whole thing about the Republican Party. They don't like you because you look different. So I don't understand why these people display their self-hatred so openly. And I don't understand why they try so hard to be involved in a party that absolutely hates them because of what they look like. So back to George Santos, right? This guy, we're going to talk about the gay marriage thing in a minute, but if you haven't been following the George Santos story, this guy has been lying for years. Essentially, his whole persona is made up. He's literally lied about everything that happened in his life. Well, not everything, but 99% of the things that this guy has said that have happened in his life have been lies, and they've been happening for years. So I think in this video, what I'd like to do is I want to go over this guy's history, right, of lying, and then we'll come back to this current story about this interview that he had with this reporter, and him claiming that he opposes gay marriage. So let's start with George Santos's history. This guy has a pretty checkered history. Now, for those of you who don't know, George Santos is a New York congressman, but he was recently expelled. So he is now an ex-congressman. But he was the first non-incumbent gay Republican congressman ever in history. So keep in mind, when we discuss all of George Santos's lies, this is the one thing that he actually did achieve. And not to say that he should be proud of this, because becoming the first gay person in a party that hates gay people is a pretty bizarre thing to want to achieve. But at any rate, George Santos achieved it. Okay, guys, so one of the first things we're going to talk about is George Santos's misuse of campaign funds. This guy had money, a lot of money, donated to his campaign, and he turned around and he used these campaign funds for personal things. He had two people donate $25,000 to him when he was in New York. That was a total of $50,000. He turned around and used that $50,000 to fund personal vacations upstate New York to get Botox injections, to go shopping, to go on shopping sprees, and to pay for OnlyFans subscriptions. And this is after George Santos said that he had no idea what OnlyFans was. Listen to this.
I'll indulge you this. I just discovered what OnlyFans was about 3 weeks ago when it was brought up in a discussion in my office.
What do you think?
And I was oblivious to the whole concept.
You just can't tell the truth.
Yes, so George Santos gets campaign donations and then turns around and uses the money to get Botox injections, OnlyFans subscriptions, and take lavish vacations and shopping sprees. Off to a great start with this guy, right? So this arguably is probably one of the least egregious things that he's done, because we all know politicians do this kind of stuff all the time. I wish that it stopped here with George Santos, but this is just the tip of the iceberg with this guy. Federal prosecutors accused Santos of defrauding political supporters while running for Congress last year. According to the indictment, Santos instructed a Queens-based political consultant to tell potential donors that their money would be used to help elect him to the House. Two people gave him $25,000 each to Redstone Strategies, an LLC operated by Santos, which was not registered as a super PAC. Santos allegedly laundered the money through two personal accounts, then used it for his personal benefit, including making cash withdrawals, personal purchases of luxury designer clothing, credit card payments, a car payment, payments on personal debts, and bank transfers to his associates, according to the indictment. Congressional investigators said Santos made a habit of covering personal expenses with campaign funds without telling donors or the FEC where the money was really going. This included significant travel expenses for flights, hotels, Ubers, and meals. When a staffer raised concerns with Santos, he said he was dining with donors and constituents, but lavish trips to Atlantic City and the Hamptons were not reported properly and did not correspond with any known campaign activities. The campaign credit card shows taxi and hotel charges in Las Vegas in December 21 during a time when Representative Santos had told his campaign staff that he was on his honeymoon and there were no corresponding campaign events on his calendar. He allegedly lied about collecting unemployment benefits. Santos had also been accused of fraudulently collecting more than $24,000 in unemployment benefits. Federal prosecutors say Santos illegally applied to receive unemployment benefits in June 2020, after the program was expanded to help people out of work due to the pandemic. Federal prosecutors say Santos illegally applied to receive unemployment benefits in June 2020 after the program was expanded to help people out of work due to the pandemic. At the time, he was employed as a regional director of a Florida-based investment firm, earning an annual salary of $120,000. So lie number 2, this guy applied for unemployment benefits while making over $100K a year. Keep in mind that these Republicans are the same people who are always railing against socialism, like socialism is a great evil, right? Unemployment benefits are a product that's a socialist product, right? If you look at it, that's exactly what the definition of socialism is. So they're okay railing against socialism and calling everybody they hate socialists, but they're totally fine taking advantage of socialist benefits. So are Republicans on Medicare, Medicaid. The hypocrisy is all the same, and it doesn't end, right? They're constantly railing against socialism, but they're okay with socialism as long as socialism pays them. George Santos allegedly committed identity theft. In a superseding indictment filed on October 10th, Santos was accused of committing identity fraud and credit card theft. Prosecutors say he made unauthorized donations using campaign donors' credit card information and stole family members' identities. You heard that right. He stole his family members' identities. He was also accused of conspiring with his campaign accountant to submit fraudulent information about contributions to the Federal Election Commission. As alleged, Santos is charged with stealing people's identities and making charges on his own donors' credit cards without their authorization, lying to the FEC, and by extension, the public about the financial state of his campaign. So you would think that it ends there with this guy, right? It doesn't. George Santos allegedly lied to Congress. All House candidates are required to file financial disclosure forms that give full accounting of their assets, income, and liabilities, among other information. Prosecutors say that while Santos certified that his disclosures were true, complete, and correct, the statements he filed in May 2020 and September 2022 were riddled with inaccuracies. The House Ethics Committee report said his campaign filings and House FD statements are replete with so many errors and omissions that they cannot be reasonably relied upon. George Santos reimbursed himself for loans that he did not make. In FEC reports, Santos said that during the 2020 and 2022 election, he made personal loans to his campaign committee and leadership totaling more than $800,000. Later, he reimbursed himself for a large portion of these loans. But the House Ethics Committee found there is substantial evidence that most of the reported personal loans were not actually made or properly disclosed to the FEC. During his first unsuccessful run for Congress in 2020, for example, Mr. Santos purported to loan his campaign $81,000 in several installments, reflected on FEC reports. In actuality, he only ever transferred $3,500. When the campaign ended, however, he repaid himself a large portion of the original fictitious loan and made $27,000 in profit. So in short, this guy pretended to loan his own personal money to his campaign, money that he didn't have, and then submitted that money as money that he needed to be reimbursed. Just completely scummy in every single way. If you think that that's bad, you're not going to believe this, but it actually gets worse than this. He also lied about where he went to high school. Santos, whose parents emigrated from Brazil, says he attended the Horace Mann School in the Bronx during the first years of high school, but had to leave the prestigious private academy in his senior year because my parents fell on hard times, which was something that would later become known as the Depression of 2008. But a spokesperson for the school told CNN in December that there was no evidence that he ever attended Horace Mann. Later, he obtained a high school equivalency diploma. So not only did he lie about going to this high school, but he never even graduated from high school. He got a high school equivalency diploma. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Totally fine to get a high school equivalency diploma. But there's a problem when you lie and said you went to high school and got a diploma. That's a problem. George Santos lied about where he went to college. So it's not only high school, it's also college. Santos claims he graduated with a degree in economics and finance from Baruch College in 2010, which suggests that he would have made it through a 4-year program in just 2 years if he actually graduated from the Horace Mann School in 2008. But a Baruch representative told the Times that there was no record of Santos being in the class of 2010. Nor is there a record of Santos being a star on the Baruch volleyball team, another thing that George Santos lied about. A biography of Santos on the National Republican Congressional Committee states Santos also spent time at New York University, a claim that NYU could not corroborate. Later, he told New York Post that he didn't graduate from any institution of higher learning. So guys, it doesn't just stop at education. George Santos lied about where he worked. George Santos said that he worked on Wall Street, but he actually never worked at Wall Street. His campaign bio states that he worked at Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, but representatives for both companies told the Times they had no record of his employment. The lies weren't that hard to figure out. Santos said he worked in Citi's real estate wing in the 2010s, though the bank sold off its asset management operations when he was in high school. After Santos was sworn into Congress, the Times obtained a copy of his inflated resume claiming that he graduated in the top 1% of his class at Baruch, earning an MBA at NYU, and was able to double the revenue on the project he worked on with Goldman. So just to recap, he said he worked on Wall Street, he said he worked for Citibank and Goldman. Representatives from both Goldman and Citibank said they had no record of this guy working there. Don't forget, the timeline didn't match up either. Because if he worked there at the time that he said he did, that would mean that Citibank was lying about when their real estate division closed their doors. Because Citibank's real estate wing closed in the 2010s, yet George Santos claims that he worked there after that. So, I mean, even just a little bit of perfunctory research would show you that this guy is literally full of garbage. So, working on Wall Street never happened. And it doesn't end there, guys. On top of everything else, in March of this year, a friend came forward informing the feds that it was Santos who taught him how to skim cards. For those of you who don't know, skimming cards are when people take a device, it's called a skimmer, and they put it in place of a standard device that you would use to run your credit or debit cards through. In the process, taking all of your information and then using your information to run up your credit or debit cards. This guy claims that Santos taught him how to skim cards. He gave me all the materials and taught me how to put skimming devices and cameras on ATM machines. Santos denied the allegation. Here's another lie. When Santos first ran for Congress in 2020, he filed a disclosure showing a salary of $55,000 working as a vice president at a business development company called Linkbridge Investors, where he says he introduced investors to hedge fund managers, claiming he once brought in $1 million in revenue in just 6 months on the job. Even there, however, he was inflating his value. Newsday reports that the company's founder testified under oath in a 2019 lawsuit that Santos was just a freelancer who sold sponsorships for events and worked on commission. So Santos lying about the amount of money he made at this job. At this point, we should not be surprised about this. Here's another lie about employment. Soon after, according to Santos, he apparently ran a $1.5 billion hedge fund in Florida. Soon after that failed congressional run, he started working at a Florida investment firm called Harbor City Capital. When he was employed there in 2020, Santos said he managed a $1.5 billion fund and bragged of record returns of 12 to 26%. But in April 2021, the Securities and Exchange Commission accused Harbor City of being a Ponzi scheme that stole $17 million from investors. The company's assets are currently under mediation with an independent receiver appointed to manage them. So now we find out that George Santos, well, at least he wasn't lying about this one, right? One of the places he did work ended up being a Ponzi scheme. This is not surprising at all, unfortunately. Skepticism about Santos's finances were amplified by his alleged fraud. In 2008, when Santos was 19 and living in Brazil, court records show he was charged with stealing the checkbook of a man his mother was caring for and wrote $700 in fraudulent checks, including for a pair of shoes. Santos also had a habit of spending $199 or $199.99 at restaurants and hotels, just shy of the threshold for expenses that campaigns are legally required to track. And loads of so-called donations come from people who don't actually exist or claim to have never sent him any money, like Santos's cousin who was dumbfounded by their alleged $5,800 pledge. So guys, so far we've covered tons of lies from George Santos. This guy's lied about where he's gone to high school. He's lied about where he's gone to college. He's lied about whether he graduated or not. He's lied about where he's worked. He's lied about working at Wall Street. He's lied about running a $1.5 billion hedge fund. This guy has taken campaign donations and used them for Botox injections and OnlyFans subscriptions. But I'm sad to report that it actually gets worse from here. That's right. This isn't everything. It gets worse. George Santos lied about founding an animal charity. Santos's campaign bio claimed he ran a foundation called Friends of Pets United, saving 2,500 dogs and cats between 2013 and 2018. But there were no social media accounts for the organization, no IRS records, and no evidence of the charity being registered in New York or New Jersey, where Santos claims to have operated. He also swindled a disabled vet whose dog was dying. Santos allegedly stole money from a disabled veteran who came to him for help to fund a life-saving surgery for his dog, according to Patch. In May 2016, Richard Osthoff, who was living in a tent in central New Jersey, learned that his pit mix would need a $3,000 surgery. A veterinary technician told the man that he knew someone named Anthony DeVolder, and Anthony DeVolder, for those of you who don't know, was George Santos's alias on social media. So this vet told the man that he knew someone named Anthony DeVolder who could help him raise the funds. After Friends of Pets United put together a GoFundMe that got the money for surgery, Santos then refused to give the money to Osthoff, whose dog died less than a year later. I mean, this is sick stuff, guys. You can't make this up. I mean, on top of everything else that we talked about, this guy lied about running an animal non-for-profit charity and lied to a guy who needed life-saving surgery for his dog, raised money for the guy's surgery, and then ran off with the money. Here we have George Santos using tragedy to benefit his personal story. George Santos said his grandmother was a Holocaust victim. In an interview with a conservative podcast in May 2022, Santos said his grandparents survived the Holocaust, and his campaign bio claimed that they fled persecution during World War II. For a lot of people who are descendants of World War II refugees or survivors of the Holocaust, a lot of names and paperwork were changed in the name of survival, Santos told Fox News last year, claiming he had Ukrainian heritage on his mother's side. But apparently, according to the genealogy records reviewed by CNN and The Forward, this did not apply to his family. There was no sign of Jewish and/or Ukrainian heritage anywhere for George Santos, and no indication of name changes along the way. Genealogist Megan Smoleniak told CNN multiple family records show that Santos's maternal grandparents were born in Brazil. Santos's lies about his family's connections to the Holocaust did not stop him from delivering remarks on the House floor on January 27th to commemorate the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Santos said that he had employees who died in the Pulse shooting. For those of you who may not remember, the Pulse was a club in Florida that got shot up by a random gunman who went and killed a bunch of people. Some scumbag who went and shot up the club and killed multiple people. George Santos once again took advantage of tragedy and said that he had employees who died in that shooting. There was no record of anyone who died in that shooting had ever been an employee of George Santos. George Santos stated once that his niece got kidnapped. Apparently, that was never corroborated, and New York Police Department said, "We found nothing at all to suggest that that was true." George Santos said he was on Hannah Montana at one point. There was no record of George Santos ever being on Hannah Montana. George Santos also said that he produced Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, a 2011 rock musical revisiting the plot of the first two movies starring Tobey Maguire. As usual with Santos, the timeline doesn't really make sense. If we were to take his word for it, this would have been at the same time that he was a volleyball star at Baruch College. So apparently this guy was a volleyball star in college and producing a Broadway musical. Both of those things were complete lies. George Santos claimed he was the target of an assassination attempt at one point. Like anybody would want to assassinate George Santos. And probably, in my opinion, one of the most disgusting lies that this guy has spewed out of his mouth was the fact that his mother's death was related to 9/11, another tragedy that this guy is using for his own personal benefit. In July 2021, Santos wrote on Twitter that the September 11 attacks claimed his mother's life. On December 23rd, 2021, he said it was the 5th anniversary of his mother's passing, a loss confirmed by her obituary. On his campaign website, Santos claimed his mother, Fatima DeVolder, was in her office in the South Tower on September 11, and that she passed away a few years later when she lost her battle to cancer. Aside from the fact that people rarely refer to 15 years as a few years, there is no record of Santos's mother suffering from the well-documented health problems caused by the toxic debris following the attacks. There is no evidence that she was ever at the World Trade Center on 9/11, and though Santos has claimed that she was a finance executive, public employment records obtained by NBC News list her only known employer as an imports business in Queens that folded in 1994. The Times reported that she once worked as a nurse in Brazil. Weeks after Santos's lies were made public, two genealogists found documents showing that his mother was in Brazil in September 2001. In 2003, Fatima DeVolder, George Santos's mother, applied for a visa to enter the U.S. In the document, she wrote that she had not been in the country since 1999. So here, on top of everything else, on top of lying to donors, top of lying about where he went to school, both for high school and college, on top of lying about where he was employed, on top of stealing his family's identities to commit credit card fraud, this guy here, in several instances, is using huge tragedies to personally benefit. I mean, it doesn't get any more disgusting than George Santos, and it's honestly very fitting that this guy was trying to be a Republican congressman, to be 100% honest with you. So there are other lies too, but I think you guys get the picture. This guy is pretty scummy in every regard. Literally nothing is beneath him in his attempts to become a corrupt politician and gain fame. And I think we've just discussed the many ways that George Santos has shown this. And this brings us up to recently, right? So last week, George Santos had an interview. And in this interview, George Santos stated that he opposes same-sex marriage. Now, as we talked about at the beginning of this video, George Santos is a gay guy and he is married. Not only was he a gay guy and married, but this interview happened a few days before the anniversary of the marriage of him and his partner. I mean, this is insane that this guy's doing this. So why, you would ask? Why would George Santos get on an interview and say that he opposes gay marriage? We'll talk about that in 1 second. I was an opposer of gay marriage, he told reporters who pressed on his relationships with more conservative Republicans in the House of Representatives, Business Insider reported. So according to George Santos, he got married because the option was available to him. So on one side, he's saying that he got married because the option was available, but then on the other side, he's saying that he doesn't believe that gay marriages should be a thing and they should be civil unions instead. So here's my question for George Santos. If you believe that you should not have gotten married, why did you get married? Why didn't you just settle for a civil union, the exact same thing that you're espousing here in this recent interview? And I think this entire thing just reeks so badly of the same problem that so many people have in the Republican Party. And it's what we talked about before at the beginning of this video. George Santos doesn't belong in the Republican Party. He's a gay man. Everyone in the Republican Party hates gay people. They hate the LGBTQ community. And this is very apparent by the fact that they are constantly trying to roll back legislation that gives LGBT communities rights. We just saw, a month ago, where some city in Tennessee tried to ban open displays of homosexuality. And we were very lucky that this ban did not pass. But if this ban passed, how many more towns and cities would we have seen in these Bible Belt swaths of country in Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama and Mississippi? How many more times would we have seen cities and towns banning public displays of homosexuality? Yet this guy wants to be a member of this party. So I'm going to say again, George Santos has no business being a Republican. He doesn't belong in that party. No gay person belongs in the Republican Party. No minority belongs in the Republican Party. No woman, for that matter, belongs in the Republican Party, because the Republican Party, of all the choices available, is the most chauvinistic party. It is the most racist and bigoted party, and this is made very obvious by the fact that every single hate group in America publicly supports the Republican Party. As if that's not enough evidence, look at Trump. Look at the MAGA movement. What is the MAGA movement really about at the end of the day? Despite all the secret dog whistles that the Republicans are using and that Trump uses to speak with his constituents and his supporters, he's not fooling anybody. Okay, at the end of the day, the MAGA movement is about keeping gays and brown people out of this country. That's what the MAGA movement is all about. You'll hear Republican supporters in interviews talk about how they want to close the borders and that they don't care if migrants come to this country as long as they come legally, but they know very well that the legal process to get migrants to come into this country is in and of itself racist, right? If these were all Irish and Scottish people coming across the border to this country, these Republicans would have no problem with it. But because they're brown-skinned people, because they're Mexicans, because they're Central Americans, because they're South Americans, because they're people who are from Islamic countries, this presents a problem for the Republicans. And this is why they don't want people, migrants, coming across the border. It has nothing to do with people, despite what they say, it has nothing to do with them wanting people to come legally. It has everything to do with the migrants' skin color. So George Santos, you don't belong in the Republican Party. Tim Scott, you don't belong in the Republican Party. They hate you. You would never have a chance to become president in the Republican Party. And you know that, okay? Meanwhile, the Democratic Party elected the first black president. Would that ever happen for Republicans? Do you honestly think that these conservative MAGA extremists down in the Bible Belt in the South would ever support Vivek Ramaswamy becoming president or Tim Scott becoming president? These guys have no chance because Republican supporters and these MAGA extremists hate them. They hate minorities. They hate the LGBTQ community. They hate women. They are extremely chauvinistic. And so I think that it is absolutely amazing that despite the fact that this party hates all these groups of people, you will still find women who support Republicans. You will still find minorities who support Republicans. You will still find members of the LGBTQ community who don't have the self-respect to stay away from the Republican Party, just like George Santos. So honestly, my final words for this topic would be to anyone who is a Republican Party member, who is a woman, who is a minority, who is a member of the LGBTQ community. Have some respect, like have some self-respect. Okay? You're part of a party right now who hates your existence and wants to see you gone. All right. They don't respect you in the Republican Party. Donald Trump doesn't respect you. His constituents down in the Bible Belt in the South don't respect you. And they're certainly not going to start respecting you just because you show that you hate yourself. Okay, the way George Santos is showing that he hates himself. So hopefully we start seeing a lot less of this, guys. Hopefully we start having these Republican members who are minorities and, women who are part of the party and gay people who are part of the party. Hopefully these people start showing a bit more self-respect and start understanding that they're in the wrong party. There is one party who supports equality despite what you look like and who you are. And it's certainly not the Republican Party. It's the Democratic Party. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you like what I'm doing, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.